Everybody ready? We're live.
I call this meeting to order. Mr. Mayor, please call roll.
Mr. Rivers?
Here.
Ms. Knapp?
Here.
Mr. Anthony?
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Trustee Rivers, Trustee Taranto asked today to the board, those in attendance, that she had shared prior that she would be unable to attend today's meeting.
Thank you.
I also wanted to share for those in attendance and those that are watching us on YouTube that the next trustee meeting is July 29th, 2 weeks from today at 10 a.m. It's an atypical date for our trustee meeting.
Do we have any agenda changes?
I have one under new business, discussion of bank records.
Do we have any other?
No, sir.
We do have some guests here with us tonight. So I would ask that we move up the fiscal officer report and new business to the beginning of the meeting before executive session, as Mr. Betts here is with us, and I know he has another meeting this evening across town, so I'd like to get that handled first.
Are we doing public comments?
Yeah. Do we have any public comments for items, in regards to items that are not on tonight's agenda? Okay, so with that, I would like to move to the fiscal officer report. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. First thing on the agenda is the 2018 audit. I have been in touch with the audit manager, and they say they're still doing some work on it. It should be finalized hopefully by the time she gets back from vacation at the end of July, and they'll be in touch to go over it and set up a time to review it with the trustees. That's an update on that. So I wanted to give a report on the topic ACH payments. A lot has been said recently over the past several months, and I thought it'd be a good idea to make sure that we kind of have the context and understand all the things that have transpired to get us to where we are today. And then obviously after my report, it's up to the board to take whatever action they'd like to take. So to make sure that my comments are accurate, I've written out my report, and I'm going to read it out loud and ask that if you have any questions, if you hold until the end, I'd be happy to answer all your questions to make sure I get through the meat of the report. And so I'll just go ahead and start. In October of last year, I realized we have a problem with lack of proper controls with regards to our credit cards with First Commonwealth. After getting input from Township staff, local government services, and the Auditor State's Office, Patty and I created a new credit card approval payment procedures. This was rolled out to department heads on December 6th of last year. I'll pass that down. That's a handout you might want to look at. On November 30th, 2018, Auditor State David Yost issued Bulletin 2018-003 to all political subdivisions on the subject of the passage of House Bill 312 amendments to regulate the usage of credit and debit cards. It required that not later than February 2nd, 2019, the legislative authority of a political subdivision that holds a credit card must adopt a written policy for the use of credit card accounts. The legislation spelled out the specifics that must be included in such policy. The Orange Township Board of Trustees adopted such a policy. As required, our policy incorporated the credit card approval payment procedures that we had initiated in early December. It also required that the fiscal office provide the trustees with a copy of the actual statements showing all transactions as soon as it is available. We started this practice with the February statements. It soon became obvious that we continue to have difficulty implementing the control procedures that we had included in our policy. Before I go on, let me just pass up very quickly. I'm sure you've seen the policy that we adopted last year, but what I did was I highlighted in this policy in yellow all the controls that are included in the policy. It starts at the bottom of page 1, all of page 2, and the top of page 3. And basically, those are the controls that we've included. Those are the controls that have been approved by the auditor, and those are the controls that we've been using since December. First Commonwealth MasterCard statements were received in the mail typically 14 to 17 calendar days before the due dates. There simply was not enough time to ensure that the payments would be made on time. BP oil cards were used to purchase fuel for various vehicles, including the fire department. The statements typically arrived about 10 calendar days before the due date. If payment was late, they would simply not honor the card. This resulted in firemen filling their trucks at the BP station and not being able to use the card to pay. Our auditors were here at the time during the 2018 doing the 2018 audit. So I had discussions with them about the problem. I also discussed it with local government services, and the LGS provided visiting fiscal officer who was providing me with training and valuable assistance at the time. In addition, I discussed it with fiscal officers of Liberty and Genoa Township. What I found was that the best practice of most townships was to pay the card balances via ACH and provide the trustees with payment voucher from UAN with all of the necessary documentation, including a copy of the statement and all receipts, along with the sign-off of the card user and their supervisor. Later, I found that many townships have these payment vouchers signed by the trustees to indicate that they have had the opportunity to review the documentation, even if the ACH payment had already been made. Since all cards have reasonable limits over credit cards, probably 95% of the charges on our credit cards are covered under a previously approved blanket purchase order, and the card users are all employees of the township. The risk of loss to the township was negligible. That is why all of these other townships were comfortable with using this best practice. However, there are two sections of the Ohio Revised Code that come into play. And I know you've seen them before, but just to make sure we all have them in front of us. Discussions with LGS about creating a policy for ACH payments, was told that it was a good idea, but she was not aware of any other townships that had such a policy. On April 22nd, I asked Brian Householder, the audit manager with the AOS, who had worked on our audit, about ACH payments. And I have a copy of that email here. Read over there. His response was, I quote, "Specifics regarding board approvals and reviews are at the discretion of the township, so long as your controls are in place to mitigate risk." Previously, when I met with Brian and other auditors as they were finishing their time here, they told me that our controls are good. In fact, I asked them, is there anything at all that we need to change? And they said, "You've addressed everything." He went on to say that information regarding ACH payments could be included in the monthly financial packets we provide to the trustees. This is in the email. We go a step further based upon the best practices we found. We actually require the trustees to sign off on the ACH payments and the related documentation. Mark Fowler developed a policy based upon his legal opinion, and it was presented to the board on May 20th. And I have it here, but I think you've all seen it. If you want a copy, I can provide it to you. So it didn't go anywhere. The board requested its own legal opinion on this matter from the prosecutor's office. I understand that it has been provided, but I have not been informed of what it contains. So I've continued to try to solve the problem by working on getting changes from our card providers. First Commonwealth Bank cannot provide online access to statements or send them via email. I have started looking at other credit card providers and found that all of them can do what we need. To do what we need to have to allow us to the time to follow our control procedures and still pay the bills on time. They include Huntington, Chase, Bank of America, etc. At a meeting today, the regional president for corporate banking at First Commonwealth Bank agreed to waive any late fees or interest charges for us until we see if they can make the changes that we need. He was surprised he didn't realize that their business credit card, I guess they call it a product, does not allow, even though I'm the administrator of credit cards, I can't go in and look at when the statements are generated 26 days before they're due. There's no way that I could go in and look at them. I can't print them, and they can't send them to me. That's totally different from every other credit card company that I talked to. He was quite surprised and concerned. He said it may take a while to make all the changes, but in the meantime, he agreed to waive any late fees, any finance charges until we get things changed. He also realizes that if they can't make these changes, we may be forced to go to another credit card company. We've also been able to have the BP oil cards emailed to us much earlier, and they have agreed to an additional 23-day grace period before an unpaid card would be turned off. So in the event that we're able to have enough time to follow our procedures and secure board approval prior to the ACH payment being made, I developed a form that may be used for the approval. And this is just a draft copy. I ran it by Mr. Betts, and would like to explain how that might work. So, assuming we can get the changes made with the credit cards, so there's actually enough time. So there's actually enough time for us to go through all of our controls and to get it to the board for their review and approval before a payment's made. This form could be used. We could still pay by ACH. We wouldn't have to write a check because one of the things that slows things down is the mail time. If we pay by ACH, oh, by the way, First Commonwealth said, yeah, we can pay by ACH, but the latest we can do is 3 days before the due date. The other credit card companies said, no, you pay on the due date. So First Commonwealth has a lot of work to do to be able to provide what we need to make this work. But the purpose of this is basically to allow the board to approve in advance the payment, and what would be attached to this would be the statement and all of the documentation for each statement. So this would be presented to the board just like we presented in the past checks for you to sign. Once you approve it, then we can make the ACH payment and have it paid on time. There's a couple issues probably Mr. Betts brought up. The law does require that the board pass a resolution in advance allowing ACH payments. The wording is in here that pursuant to the resolution, which was approved by the board's authorizing this payment. So we may have to work out a couple of details, but I think this will go a long way toward solving the problem. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Well, I have a few notes. I didn't prepare a 15-minute speech, but this all began back in April of 2019 when the fiscal officer reported that he was going to start paying credit card bills via ACH automatically prior to trustee approval and review in advance. And I explained in detail that the Attorney General opinions and the law state that every single payment that comes out of the township must be signed or approved by two different trustees, or two or three trustees. There's absolutely no exceptions to that. And I wrote an email detailing that to you. Mr. Mayor wrote back and said the auditors, and this provides checks and balances because the trustees are a direct check and balance on the fiscal office. We are not, we're two different offices and we're supposed to be making sure the other one's doing their job and abiding by the law. So the fiscal officer replied that the auditors and prosecutor told him it was fine to do it the way he was doing. I continued to explain politely that it was not legal for many months. In fact, I checked with the auditor of state and the county prosecutor, and they both informed me that they had not told Mr. Mayor that he did not need to abide by that part of the law, which I think is Ohio Revised Code section, I think 307. I continued to try to discuss this with Mr. Mayor at least 13 times, trying to find a way to abide by the law. I even tried to discuss it with him after the last trustee meeting, coming to a compromise stating, I said, we have 15 to 17 days. What can we do to make sure these payments get made on time? Other other business entities don't seem to have a problem with it. And I was suggesting different ways, such as a packet provided in advance that we could all take a look at. We get a deadline, it would state on this date it was due. And he walked away from me saying he was not going to argue with me. With that, I specifically considered that to be a discussion, but he considered it to be an argument. And because Mr. Mayor stated that he had opinions from the county prosecutor indicating that he did not need our advance approval, at the last trustee meeting, Trustee Trano and I requested that a formal opinion be requested. Trustee Rivers voted no on that for some reason, but I am concerned about following the law and getting correct legal advice. This is what we're elected to do, and it's a responsibility I take very seriously. My main point was 2.5 weeks should be plenty of time to make the payment. So we did get the advice back from the county prosecutor a couple weeks ago. Are you okay with me sharing this, Trustee Rivers? Okay. So this is a legal advice that was sent to the trustees. It basically says that, as in regards to the ACH, it says the final type of payee that the township pays by ACH are credit card vendors and other non-governmental payees. The revised code has two relevant statutes pertaining to ACH payments. The first, RC 9.37, permits the electronic transfer of funds. So a township does have the authority to make ACH payments if the dictates of RC 9.37 are met. The second relevant statute is RC 50711. In Section B, the statute states, no money belonging to the township shall be paid out except upon an order signed personally by at least two of the township trustees and countersigned by the township clerk, which is what I've been referring to. Accordingly, disbursements of township monies require an order signed by at least two township trustees and countersigned by the township clerk. The Ohio Attorney General has opined on how these two statutes should be interpreted together. In opinion OAG 97053, the AG states, where two statutes such as RC 50711B and RC 937B relate to the same subject, payment of public funds, they should be harmonized to the extent possible in order to give effect to both statutes. Accordingly, because RC 50711B requires any order for the payment of township funds to be personally signed by at least two of the township trustees and countersigned by the township clerk, any order for the direct deposit of township funds by electronic transfer must also be so signed. So basically it says on here that the statutes, along with the guidance of the Attorney General, indicate that the township's credit card ACH payments should be processed in the same manner as the direct deposit of funds. In other words, must be signed by at least two of the township trustees and countersigned by the fiscal officer. So this is the point I was trying to make for a very long time. I continued to think that this was the right way to do it, and I really felt like it was ignored. But the good news is that after I was discussing this in the back room, your employee Leanne approached me and said, very generously and kindly, she said, how can I help resolve this issue? What can I do that would make both of you happy? And I applaud her for that. So I explained to her we could put together, if the fiscal officer could put together a packet of the credit card receipts along with the statement and email it to the trustees along with a firm deadline. We need two signatures by this day. or possibly 3, and it would be up to us to review the information and have it to you on time. And as long as we got, hopefully a couple of days notice, that really shouldn't be a problem. So I did work with her, and she said she was going to discuss it, I believe, with you. So I really appreciate it. She's a very fine employee. But so we've come to the conclusion here where we need to put a new policy into place that to ensure that we adhere to the law.
So I think everyone's saying the same thing here. We can pay credit cards by ACH.
Yes.
It's just a question of, in the process, getting that to where it needs to be and the timing and making sure that we get it done in time. So we don't incur any late charges or fines.
Exactly. That's been the goal all along. So are we asking for this to be approved tonight or?
But there's not to be approved for me.
Mr. Betts, do you have anything to add?
Christopher Betts, Assistant Prosecuting Attorney with the Delaware County Prosecutor's Office. I tend to agree. I think everybody's kind of on the same page as what actually needs to happen. It's just a matter of working out the process. I think everybody's familiar with the law at this point, 50711B. It's actually been amended from the time that AG's opinion was written. It was in Mr. Fowler's opinion that you read from. There's a B2 section in there now, which kind of addresses or refers back to 937 and says that there can be a policy for making payments via ACH, but it doesn't alleviate having those payments approved each time. So a policy and paying individual payments are two different things. So in a way, it does reference the payments by ACH, but it still does not get rid of or, like I say, alleviate the necessity of having it signed by true trustees and countersigned by the fiscal officer. The form that I think that Mr. Maynard passed out, I think that's kind of an administrative form, an administrative tool that may be helpful. I'm not sure. The board's going to have to decide that, but I think it's a matter of everybody working together at this point just to come up with some sort of procedure that's going to work and comply with the law. I admit it's not the easiest requirements to maybe comply with, given today's technology and what we're dealing with, but nevertheless, I think it's just a matter of everybody kind of putting their heads together and trying to come up with a solution to this issue. And I think it can be done. It's just a matter of deciding how that's going to work and be a process.
The logistics of it,
Right.
yeah.
And in Mr. Fowler's letter, he said that I've been working with the Orange Township Fiscal Officer to adopt a policy that will outline procedures for all township ACH payments. So I'm sure that you'll be able to help us in completing this process.
We're happy to help as far as some sort of a procedure. Like I say, I think we've advised everybody at this point as to what the law is. I think everybody's familiar with that. But we can certainly help where we can in terms of coming up with some policy or procedure that's going to be helpful to the board and helpful to the fiscal office and, getting this all accomplished in a timely manner.
Sure.
So that, we could put this aside and move on.
It would be
to
very
other things.
simple if we just get the information, the credit card, the receipts, the documentation, and the statements emailed to the trustees or wherever. We look at it, we approve it, that's it. I mean, it's very simple. I think it would be very simple.
Well, and with your discussions with BP and with First Commonwealth, it sounds like now we've got some extra time
Yeah,
in the process.
the issue is that given the way First Commonwealth processes credit cards for their business clients, individual people can go online and get the statements right away. There is not enough time to have all of the credit card users reconcile their cards, get them signed off on by their bosses, get them back, sent out to the trustees, sent back and paid. They don't have enough time. So I found that, and I tried to work that out with First Commonwealth, and they said, sorry, that isn't going to work. That's why the regional president of the bank was here today, because he said, I didn't know we had this problem. We have to fix this problem. And I said, well, in the meantime, we don't want to have any more late fees. He said, we'll wait until we get this worked out. He said, I can't promise you we can get it worked out, but we'll try. And I said, if you can't get it worked out, we have to go to a credit card company that gives us the time to get this done. That's the problem. I've been trying to solve this problem. I'm very aware of every law. I'm also aware of all the townships that have other practices that allow allow them to pay by ACH. And they have found that the auditors have never cited the ones I talked to for not having the approval in advance. Those townships have the approval of the payment voucher afterwards. It works for them. Our board doesn't want to do that. So I've worked very hard to come up with an alternative. We fixed the problem with BP. Now I have to fix the problem with the credit cards. And we have to have a lot more time, at least another 10 days to get it done. There's too many moving parts.
So how is this done for that? We've had credit cards with them for like 8 years. So every single month our payments have been late.
There was a lot. Wait till you hear the 2018 audit report. I mean, I don't know a lot. I just know that it's been almost impossible. And one of the biggest delays in the whole process, believe it or not, is getting the trustees to sign and then the mail. Those two together, sometimes trustees are only in every 5 days or so.
But you just email, like I requested, you just send us an email packet and we look at it and then we give it to Dave. But I have a question though. What do we do about the payments that you made in April, May, June, and July that were not authorized in advance by the trustees?
Well, that's a question for the prosecutor and the auditor. If you think something should be done, I suggest it.
Well, that was my concern, but I want to clarify that I personally want to follow the law, and that's why I want to follow this. I don't want to get a finding a couple years from now that says, oh, all these payments weren't approved correctly, and you're in the hole for $50,000. I mean, I want to comply with the law.
Prior to 18, were the credit cards, was that actually DCB? And with the
Same
transition
company.
over, right, but did that, the credit?
And so he would know, it's always been the same. We've always had like 15 to 17 days.
But there's a possibility.
But they were paid by check before. Oh, well, I know the difference. Of course, when I got here, there wasn't any good control in place. What happened was that when the credit card statements came in, the users sent their receipts to Patty and expected her to do the reconciliation of all the credit card statements.
Right, you fixed that.
Yeah. Well, and that made it really quick.
Right.
And that's what. But when I put controls in place, because I do believe in strong controls, and I announced it to the department heads, and explained it to them, it takes longer. They have 3 or 4 days at the most to turn those around and get them back to us. We still have to review them. There is not enough time with the current First Commonwealth. I mean, I know.
Okay, so are we gonna work together on this, or what's the plan then for next time? Are we gonna, do we have to approve, Chris, you said we have to approve an ACH policy in advance, is that true?
It's up to the board as to how they want to do that. All I'm saying is that there needs to become an agreed upon procedure about how to do this, whether that's done by policy or whether it's done by some other mechanism. I think that's for the board to decide. Certainly I think it's great that Mr. Mayor was able to reach out to First Commonwealth and to VP and bring some of these issues to their attention and maybe get some of these addressed by whether it's an extension or whether it's a waiver or what have you. Hopefully we were able to get some of that in writing, but nevertheless, I think it's great. We don't want to necessarily rely on that going into the future. We want to, bring everything in tight.
Maybe table it to the
some
next
sort of a
meeting.
procedure, but I think it's a matter of the board and the fiscal office agreeing how to do this. And there's 100 different ways to do it, but what's going to work for everybody up here is what we need to agree on.
I think we can just table it to the next meeting, have Mr. Mayor put something together, and we could work on it.
It's for the board to decide, and we're happy to help.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I have a question. Ms. Beth, should we be concerned with the amount of dollars accumulated that are waived by the bank for fees?
I'm not aware of what Mr. Mayor is saying, whether we'll ever be able to know what those numbers are, to be perfectly honest. If we're given those numbers, it'd be nice to keep track of those things, whether they come into play or not, I can't say at this point. But it's great that the bank was willing to discuss and work on these particular issues, because, certainly I think they recognize that they want to work with their customers to make things work, and maybe they weren't aware of some of these things, as it sounds, that statements weren't available online, that type of thing, at least for businesses.
Yeah,
and
they're not very
government entities.
business friendly at
I
all.
would venture to guess they don't have many political clients or
Alright.
political subdivision representation.
So are we just gonna table this for next time? We spent a lot of time on it. Alright,
Okay.
thanks.
Yep.
There's 2 other items, I believe, for the fiscal officer.
Okay, let me go back to it. Out of order, it'll just take me a minute to find that section.
Page 8 of the template.
Oh, okay, it was. Sorry. Got it. There is a reallocation of appropriations within the EMS operating account. And there's a resolution to do that. Just a matter of the appropriations weren't quite enough, so we need to move some money. And then there's a blanket certificate. In fact, there's a list in here. This wording is not correct, so we'll have to pass on this. But the first resolution to reallocate the appropriation is correct.
Do you have any questions? I make the motion to authorize the reallocation of appropriation from the account code 2191-930-930-0000, contingencies to account 2191-220-420-2402, EMS operating, and the amount of $20,000 for EMS operating.
Second.
Mr. Rivers?
Yes.
Ms. Knapp?
Yes.
Mr. Anto?
I believe that is all we had for fiscal.
So are we tabling the blanket certificate to the next meeting?
Yeah,
Is that correct?
yeah, I have to look into that, make sure it doesn't look correct. So.
And then we had county prosecutor's opinion A, 13 new business. Was that in regards to ACH?
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions or anything else covered?
Not on that.
Okay. And then you had added bank records.
Yeah, I'd like to save that for later in the meeting. If that's okay.
Well, we're on new business now.
Well, I need to discuss something with Mike, and I thought we were going to executive session.
Well, no, that's what, since we're the prosecutor's office here, we put at the beginning.
Yeah,
Both
you
with
did. You
fiscal.
pushed them up to the beginning. I'm not ready because I need to ask Mike a question. I thought we were going to executive session before, when the meeting agenda was published, it showed we were going to executive session. So.
I make a motion that the board go to executive session to consider confidential information directly related to negotiations with other political subdivisions respecting requests for economic development assistance that is to be provided or administered under Chapter 715 of the Ohio Revised Code, and the board determines the executive session is necessary to protect the interests of the applicants or the possible investment or expenditure of public funds to be made in connection with the economic development project. Also to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official, or the investigation of charges or complaints against a public employee, official, licensee, or regulated individual unless the public employee, official, licensee, or regulated individual requests a public hearing.
Weren't we told at the last meeting that we have to whittle that down? We're not allowed to say that. I think Mr. Betts said that. We need to select the actual applicable parts from that. Is that correct, Mr. Betts? Reiterate.
Christopher Betts, Assistant Prosecuting Attorney. Yes, that is correct. You need to select out of the longer list that's in 121.22G1, which is, everybody refers to it as the employment exception for executive session. Which of those are actually going to apply to your executive session? You can select more than one.
Sure.
I'm not sure. I have no idea what it is, so someone else will have to decide.
Chief,
I believe it'll just be the first ones. The first option,
The appointment?
to consider the appointment of dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of public employee. That would be the one the rest of that does not apply.
Are we actually considering all of those items? Employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion?
That was a singular option, so now we have to whittle down
Yeah.
that singular option to one.
You don't have to whittle it down to one. It can be more than one, but you have to narrow it down to the one or ones that apply to the executive session. So for example, if you're hiring somebody, it could be for the employment of a public employee. If it's something where it's a disciplinary action, it could be for dismissal, discipline. If it's for a raise, then it could be for promotion.
Yeah, you have to pick the
And
applicable.
compensation.
I believe it would be to consider the employment or compensation. I think both of those would apply.
What else do you think it is, Amanda?
Is it appointment, employment, and compensation? Does that cover those three? Appointment, employment, and compensation. To consider the appointment, employment, dismissal.
Employment and compensation? What about dismissal?
I think it should be employment, dismissal, compensation.
Employer dismissal and compensation. Okay.
okay. Also to consider the employment, dismissal, or compensation of a public employee or official.
Second?
Mr. Rivers,
Yes.
Ms. Knapp,
Yes.
Mr. Tranto,
The following are invited to attend: Mr. Lamb, Mr. McCarthy, Mr. Bodnar, and Mrs. Shidler. And Chief Bill.
Ballpark guess on how long? Is it 10 minutes or is it an hour? Ballpark.
20 minutes.
All right, thank you.